Why? It sounds like a tabloid headline, but it's my reality. My mom replaced me with her stepdaughter. Why? So I took my dad's side in the divorce and watched her lose everything. Now she's begging to reconcile. When this started, why? I was 16 and naive enough to think biology mattered more than convenience. I am Jack and I know better now. Before the fallout, why? You need the context. The betrayal didn't start with a fight. It actually started with a very specific kind of silence. For the first 12 years, why? I wasn't just a son. I was a rescue project. My dad, Vincent, was a long-haul trucker. He was a ghost who paid the mortgage. Why? Home for 3 days to wash clothes and sleep before vanishing again. That left Catherine. My mom. She told everyone we were a team. Why? Justice against the world, she'd say while tucking me in. I believed it. Why wouldn't I? Why? She was the only parent who actually knew my middle name or my favorite color. We had rituals that felt sacred at the time. Why? Friday nights meant ordering pepperoni pizza from Sal's and watching movies until midnight. If I had a bad week at school, we got ice cream. Why? If I had a nightmare, she was there instantly. Other kids complained about helicopter parents, but I felt lucky. Why? I thought my mom just cared more than theirs did. It felt permanent, like bedrock. Why? I didn't realize that bedrock creates fault lines if you put enough pressure on the wrong spot. The pressure arrived when I turned 12. Why? Dad finally got off the road to open a local repair shop. He was home for dinner every night. You'd think having a complete family would be good. Why? But it destroyed the ecosystem my mom had built. She was used to being the captain, the navigator, and the judge. Suddenly, why? This stranger with grace under his fingernails had opinions on my curfew. The house stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a cold, quiet battlefield. They fought constantly, but rarely raised their voices. It was aggressive dishwashing and slamming doors. Why? I started eating in my room just to avoid the tension radiating off them. When they finally sat me down to announce the split, I was 15. Why? My mom did the talking, looking tragic and noble. Dad just sat there, looking defeated. I blamed him entirely. In my head, why? He was the intruder who ruined our perfect team. I thought his return was the problem that broke us apart. The custody was supposed to be 50-50. Why? But I manipulated it. I made excuses to stay at Mom's house, leaving Dad alone in his empty apartment. He never fought me on it. Why? Just looked sad and said he loved me. I thought I was protecting the parent who actually wanted me. I was wrong. The divorce was just the opening act. Why? The tragedy wasn't my father leaving. It was who walked through the front door, 8 months later wearing a tailored suit. Why? It was only 8 months after the divorce papers were signed when Darren appeared. He was a sales director for a pharmaceutical company. Why? Which meant expensive suits and a vocabulary that sounded like a permanent pitch meeting. Why? He drove a BMW he washed every Sunday like a religious ritual. I met him exactly twice before my mom announced they were moving in together. Why? There was no discussion. She just told me to smile, so I did. I didn't realize that my compliance was actually permission. Then came the baggage. Why? Which arrived in the form of a 15-year-old girl named Ruby. She was Darren's daughter. Why? Trapped in a custody war with her own mother in another state. Ruby didn't just walk into a room, she assessed it for weaknesses. Why? She had long hair she flipped constantly and a phone glued to her hand. She looked at our modest house like it was a temporary holding cell. Why? I tried to say hello, but she just scrolled past me without looking up. Why? The invasion became physical within 48 8 hours of the moving trucks departing. Why? Ruby decided she needed the guest room because it had the attached bathroom. My bedroom had been next to the main hall bath for 16 years. Why? But suddenly that logic didn't apply. It just makes more sense for me to have the en suite, she said over dinner, picking at her salad. Why? Girls need more privacy. That's just how it is. I waited for my mom to correct her, but the heavy silence stretched. She has a point? Why? Sweetie, my mom finally said, avoiding my eyes. You can make it work down the hall. It wasn't just about the bathroom. Why? It was the message that my comfort was negotiable while Ruby's was mandatory. Why? I moved my toiletries out of the bathroom. I'd use my entire life while Ruby watched from the doorway. She didn't say thank you. She just smirked. Why? A tiny expression that vanished the second my mother walked past us carrying stacks of plush towels. Over the next few weeks, why? The phrase, settling in, became a weapon. Ruby reorganized the kitchen cabinets because she couldn't find anything. Why? She complained the television was too loud when I watched football, yet blasted her music through the house at all hours. Why? When I asked her to turn it down, my mom intervened immediately. Why? She's been through a lot with her parents' divorce. Mom whispered to me in the hallway. Why? We need to give her time to adjust. My own divorce trauma was apparently irrelevant. The worst part wasn't the noise or the bathroom. Why? It was watching my mother transform. Why? She started buying the expensive snacks Ruby liked and stopped ordering our Friday night pizza because Ruby was watching her carbs. Mom stopped asking about my day and started obsessing over Ruby's social calendar. Why? It felt less like she was accommodating a guest and more like she was auditioning for a role. She wanted to be the cool. Why? Young mom Ruby apparently needed, even if it meant forgetting she already had a son. Why? My adjustment period had ended the moment the ink dried on the divorce papers, but Ruby's adjustment period seemed indefinite. One evening, why? I found my favorite spot on the couch occupied by Ruby's backpack and coat. When I went to move them, she snapped at me to leave her stuff alone. Lie. My mom just smiled from the kitchen, looking at Ruby with a terrifying fondness. I realized then that Ruby wasn't settling in. She was taking over. Why? And my mother was handing her the keys. I spent the entire autumn bagging groceries at a discount chain to fund my plan. Why? My hands smelled perpetually like onions and sanitizer, but I needed the cash. Why? I'd seen my mom eyeing a cashmere scarf at the department store for weeks. It was a soft charcoal gray. Why? Expensive enough to require skipping school lunches for 2 months. I figured if I bought her something beautiful. Why? Something that proved I paid attention, I could buy my way back into her heart. Why? Christmas morning felt more like a corporate performance review than a holiday. The living room was perfectly staged. Why? With Ruby's stocking overflowing while mine looked sad and deflated. Darren sat in his armchair, checking work emails on his phone. What? My mom fluttered around, forcing bright smiles. I handed her my box first, my heart hammering against my ribs. Why? It was wrapped in silver paper I'd creased with obsessive care. I held my breath, waiting for the warmth to finally return. Why? She peeled back the paper and lifted the lid. Oh, a scarf, she said, her voice polite but flat. Why? She didn't hold it up to the light or stroke the fabric. She just set it back in the tissue paper like it was a pair of socks. Thank you, Jack. Why? That's practical. The word stung worse than a slap. She placed the box on the floor next to the trash bag. Why? It was forgotten before she'd closed the lid. Then Ruby handed over her gift. It was a small, heavy box with a designer logo stamped in gold foil. Why? Mom gasped before she even opened it. Inside was a leather purse that cost more than I made in 3 months of bagging groceries. Why? I knew Darren had paid for it. Ruby didn't have a job, but Mom didn't care about the logistics. She squealed, actually squealed, why, and pressed the bag to her chest. It's perfect, she whispered. You know me. Mom lunged at Ruby. Law, why? Pulling her into a hug that lasted 10 seconds too long. She rocked her back and forth, murmuring about how thoughtful she was. Why? I sat 3 feet away on the ottoman, invisible. My gray scarf sat in its box on the floor. Why? Dangerously close to being stepped on by Darren's slippers. I watched them, feeling a cold, hard weight settle in my stomach. Why? I wasn't competing with a stepsister. I was competing with a bank account. The humiliation didn't end with the morning unwrapping. A week later. Why? I found a crumpled receipt on the kitchen counter while getting a glass of water. It was from a jewelry store downtown. Why? Mom had taken Ruby to get matching diamond studs. $300. I stared at the total, feeling the blood drain from my face. Why? I had asked for a $40 pair of headphones for months because mine were broken. Mom had told me money was just too tight. Why? I looked at the receipt, then at my old headphones taped together. Money wasn't tight. It was just tight for me. Why? The budget had plenty of room for Ruby's ears, just not for my music. That was the moment the hope finally died. Why? I stopped trying to earn my way back onto the team. I crumpled the receipt and tossed it into the trash on top of a coffee filter. Why? That was the day I started saving for my escape. The first entry in my digital log started on a rainy Tuesday in March. Why? I had a sports physical scheduled for weeks, a requirement to stay on the track team. Mom was supposed to drive me, but when I came downstairs, why? Ruby was already in the passenger seat. She needed to renew her learner's permit before the DMV closed. We'll swing by the DMV first, Mom said. Why? Checking her lipstick in the rearview mirror. It won't take long. I pointed at the clock on the microwave, which read 1:15. Why? My appointment was at 2, and the DMV was notorious for 2-hour waits. We won't make it, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Why? Can't Ruby go tomorrow? Mom sighed, gripping the steering wheel like I was asking for a kidney. Her permit expires in 3 days, Jack. Why? Stop being so dramatic. We can fit it all in if you just hurry up. We didn't fit it all in. Law, why? We sat in the fluorescent purgatory of the DMV for 90 minutes while my appointment time came and went. I texted my coach to apologize. Why? My stomach churning with anxiety. When Ruby finally got her paper permit, she beamed at Mom like she'd won a Nobel Prize. Why? Let's get smoothies to celebrate, Ruby chirped. Mom agreed instantly. She didn't even mention the doctor's office she had just forced me to skip. Why? I told my dad about it that weekend, my voice shaking with rage. His girlfriend, Naomi, listened quietly while chopping vegetables for a stew. Why? She was a trauma nurse, calm in a way that made you feel safe. Don't just get mad, she said, setting down her knife. Get evidence. Write it down. Why? Dates, times, direct quotes. People like your mother rely on you for getting the details so they can call you crazy. Why? Don't let her do that. That night, I opened a locked note on my phone and started typing. The list grew terrifyingly fast over the next month. Why? April 12th, Mom skips my parent teacher conference to watch Ruby's dance showcase. April 20th. Why? Mom forgets to buy groceries for my diet but stocks the pantry with Ruby's gluten-free snacks. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. Why? It was a pattern of systematic erasure, documented in black and white pixels. I finally had proof I wasn't invisible. Why? The pettiness escalated when Ruby started eating the leftovers I labeled with my name. I'd come home from a shift famished. Why? Only to find my container in the trash. When I confronted her, she widened her eyes in mock innocence. "Oh my God, I had no idea," she said. "Why?" Licking sauce off her thumb. Mom defended her immediately. "It's just pasta, Jack. She's a growing girl. Why?" "You can make a sandwich." The log got another entry: May 4th theft. That evening, I caught Ruby alone in the kitchen while Mom was upstairs. Why? I expected her to apologize or ignore me, but she did something worse. She looked at the trash can, then at me, and smiled. Why? It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the sharp, satisfied grin of a predator playing with its food. Why? "You should probably label things better," she whispered. She knew exactly what she was doing. The game wasn't accidental, it was targeted. Why? The invitation wasn't a request, it was a royal summons. Mom needed the perfect blended family backdrop for Darren's boss. Why? A man who smelled like expensive cigars and silent judgment. I was stuffed into a stiff button-down shirt and ordered to be charming for 3 hours. Why? The dining room air was thick with polite laughter and the clinking of heavy silverware. I sat at the far end of the table. Why? Pushing dry chicken around my plate while Ruby held court. She laughed at jokes she didn't understand, playing the role perfectly. Why? After an hour of nodding silently, I excused myself to use the restroom. The silence of the hallway felt like cool water after a burn. Why? This corridor had always been the family timeline, a museum of our history. There were baby photos, little league trophies. Why? And my 8th grade graduation certificate. I walked past them, grounding myself in the evidence that I used to matter here. Why? But when I reached the center of the display, my feet stopped. Something was wrong with the layout. The symmetry was off. Why? My junior year school portrait had hung in the center spot for 6 months. It was gone. In its place hung a glossy, why? High-resolution print of Mom and Ruby at a spa. They were wearing matching white robes, holding cucumber water. Why? And laughing with their heads thrown back. It was a candid moment of pure joy, professionally framed and matted. My photo wasn't just moved. Why? It had vanished entirely. The wall that was supposed to chronicle my life had just edited me out of the narrative. It looks way better. Why? Doesn't it? Ruby's voice sounded behind me. I didn't turn around. I could hear the ice tinkling in her glass of water. She stepped up beside me. Why? Admiring the wall like an art critic. Your mom thought the old one was depressing. The lighting was bad. She took a sip. Why? Her eyes dancing with amusement. This one really captures the vibe of the house now. Happy, bright. She wasn't talking about lighting. Why? She was telling me I was the darkness they wanted to crop out. The rage didn't burn, it froze. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly. Why? And ripped the frame off the hook. Ruby gasped, dropping her mask of boredom. What are you doing? She hissed. I didn't answer. Why? I let the frame drop. It hit the hardwood floor with a crash, the glass shattering into 1,000 diamonds. Why? The conversation in the dining room died instantly. Footsteps thundered toward us. Mom turned the corner first. Why? Her face a mask of panic that curdled into fury when she saw the mess. Jack! Mom screamed, rushing past me. Are you okay? Why? Did he throw it at you? Ruby shrank back, summoning fake tears with terrifying speed. He just went crazy. She sobbed into Mom's shoulder. Why? I was just looking at the wall. Mom turned to me, her eyes cold and hard as flint. Why? She didn't look at the photo of her and Ruby lying in the shards. She only saw a threat to her perfect stepdaughter. Go to your room. She spat. Why? You've ruined everything. I'm not going to my room, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And I'm not fixing this. I looked at Darren. Why? Who stood in the doorway, then turned my back on them. I walked upstairs, but I didn't stay. I packed 2 duffel bags, shoved the window open. Why? And climbed onto the garage roof. The night air hit me like freedom. I dropped to the lawn and started walking toward the highway. Why? I didn't have a car, but I had a father 3 miles away. My dress shoes blistered my heels with every step on the asphalt. Why? Turning the 3-mile trek into a physical punishment for my emotional escape. By the time I reached my dad's apartment complex, why? My button-down shirt was plastered to my back with sweat. I knocked on number 4B praying he was home. Why? He opened the door wearing worn-out sweatpants and an old concert t-shirt, squinting against the hallway light. Why? He took one look at my bloodshot eyes and the duffel bags cutting into my shoulders. He didn't ask a single question. He just stepped aside and said, "Why? Come in." The next morning smelled like bacon and sanity. Naomi set a plate of eggs in front of me, her movements efficient and kind. Why? I sat at the small kitchen table and spilled everything, the words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. I told them about the Christmas scarf. Why? The DMV waiting room, and the shattered frame on the floor. My dad listened without interrupting. Why? His jaw tightening until a muscle near his ear started to jump. When I finished, he set his coffee cup down with a definitive clatter. Why? He looked at me. You are staying here. My mother's reaction was a masterclass in chaotic escalation. She called my phone 12 times before noon. Why? The voicemails shifted rapidly from tearful concern to icy rage. First, she just wanted to know I was safe. By the third message, why? She was accusing me of humiliating her in front of Darren's boss. If you aren't home by dinner, why? There will be serious consequences, she hissed in the final recording. She didn't ask why I left. Why? She only cared that my absence left a hole in her perfect family portrait. Dad finally took my phone and turned it off. Why? Vincent didn't just provide a bunker, he prepared an airstrike. He called Howard.
Law? Why?
A lawyer he'd known since high school who owed him a favor for fixing a transmission. Why? Howard was a family law specialist with a reputation for being aggressive. We drove to his office that afternoon. Why? Watching my dad navigate the traffic, I realized something had shifted. The passive man who had accepted the divorce to keep the peace was gone. Law, why? In his place was a father who had realized his son was drowning. He wasn't going to let me go under. Why? Howard's office smelled like old paper and expensive cologne. He sat behind a mahogany desk, listening as I recounted the last year. Why? I felt petty listing the grievances out loud. Complaining about a bathroom or a scarf sounded childish in this serious room. Why? I started to apologize for wasting his time, but Howard held up a hand. Stop, he said sharply. This isn't about a scarf, Jack. Why? This is parental alienation and emotional neglect. The court doesn't care about feelings, but they care about patterns. Why? Do you have any proof of this pattern? I hesitated, then pulled my phone back out. I wrote things down, I said. Why? Naomi told me to. I slid the device across the desk. Howard scrolled through the document, his eyebrows climbing higher with every swipe. Why? He read the entry about the missed doctor's appointment, and the quote where Mom called me dramatic. This is exactly what we need, Howard muttered. Why? Tapping the screen. Most kids just have vague complaints. You have a contemporaneous log. This isn't hearsay, Jack. In the eyes of a judge. Why? This is admissible evidence. Howard didn't stop at the emotional abuse. He pivoted to the financials, asking my dad about child support payments. Why? Dad confirmed he paid the full amount every month, plus extras for my sports gear. Howard pulled up my mom's recent tax filings on his computer. Why? A slow, shark-like smile spread across his face. She claimed Jack as a full dependent, he said. Even though you pay for his food, clothes, why, and insurance. He looked at my dad. That is tax fraud, Vincent. Why? And it gives us leverage to open up her entire financial history. The strategy session that followed was brutal and efficient. Why? We weren't just asking for me to stay with Dad. We were filing for a complete custody modification based on neglect and financial impropriety. Why? Howard outlined the timeline. We would file an emergency petition immediately. My mom would be served with the papers at her office. Why? In front of her colleagues. It was a calculated move designed to rattle her. She thrives on appearance, Howard noted, closing a file folder. Why? So we are going to attack her image first. She won't know what hit her. Walking out of the office. Why? The heavy dread that had lived in my chest for months began to dissipate. Why? My phone buzzed in my pocket again. Another angry text from Mom demanding I return the house key. Why? I didn't feel the urge to reply or explain myself anymore. Why? She thought she was disciplining a rebellious teenager who would eventually come crawling back for forgiveness. Why? She had no idea she was about to go to war with a forensic accountant and a father who had finally had enough. Why? I got into Dad's truck and finally exhaled. The courtroom air was stale, smelling of floor wax and anxious sweat. Mom sat on the other side. Why? Wearing a powder blue suit that screamed innocent victim. She wouldn't look at me. Why? Keeping her eyes fixed on the judge like she was trying to hypnotize him. Howard didn't waste time with theatrical speeches. Why? He simply handed over the binder containing my log and the financial records. It landed on the judge's bench with a heavy thud. Why? That sound was the gavel before the gavel. The judge opened it, adjusted his glasses, and the room went silent. Why? Mom tried to interrupt when the judge asked about the missed medical appointments. Why? She started a rehearsed monologue about scheduling conflicts, but the judge raised a hand to stop her. He cited the dates, the times. Why? And the undeniable pattern of neglect documented in my notes. He then turned to the tax returns, asking why she claimed a child she barely supported. Why? Her face drained of color. The ruling was swift and brutal. Full physical custody was awarded to my father immediately. Why? Mom walked out of there looking like she'd been slapped. We met in the parking lot, the asphalt shimmering in the June heat. Mom marched toward us. Why? Her composure cracking under the glare of the sun. She ignored my dad and zeroed in on me, her eyes wet with angry tears. You're breaking my heart, Jack, she said, reaching for my arm. How could you let them lie about me? I flinched, but I didn't have to speak. Dad stepped between us. Why, a solid wall of denim and resolve. Not today, Catherine, he said quietly. You had your chance. The legal defeat was the first domino. Why? But the financial audit was the wrecking ball. Darren hadn't attended the hearing. Why? But the court documents regarding the tax fraud made their way to him. Darren was a man who lived by spreadsheets and quarterly projections. Why? He hated surprises. When he realized his wife had been claiming a dependent she wasn't supporting, he started wondering what else didn't add up. Why? That weekend, while Mom was likely drafting a pity post for Facebook, Darren sat down in his home office and opened the joint bank statements. Why? He traced the money trail back 18 months, right to when they moved in together. It wasn't one large theft, it was a slow bleed. Why? 200 here for groceries. 500 there for home repairs. That never happened. Why? It all funneled into a private account Mom had never disclosed. By the time Darren tallied the final column, why? The total was over $12,000. This wasn't just poor budgeting or overspending on shoes. Why? This was systematic embezzlement from their marriage to fund a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. The explosion happened on a Tuesday night. Why? I wasn't there, but the neighbors heard enough to fill in the gaps. Darren confronted her in the kitchen. Why? Slapping the highlighted bank statements onto the granite island. Mom tried to play it off, claiming the money was a rainy day fund for the family. Why? She tried to gaslight him, telling him he was confused and paranoid. But Darren wasn't a teenager seeking approval. Why? He was a sales director who knew when someone was cooking the books. He didn't buy the lie. Darren didn't just ask for a divorce. Law, why? He evicted the source of the chaos. The house was in his name, bought before the marriage, and the prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Why? He gave her 48 hours to vacate the premises. I heard she tried to negotiate, tried to cry, tried to use Ruby as a shield. Why? But Darren was done. The trust had evaporated the moment he saw that secret account balance. He packed a bag and went to a hotel. Why? Leaving her alone in the house to pack her boxes. The dismantling of her life was thorough and humiliating. Why? The white SUV she loved to drive was leased through Darren's company, so that was repossessed immediately. Without a vehicle or a place to live, why Mom had to scramble? Why? She ended up renting a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood she used to mock for being trashy. It was a poetic nosedive. Why? She went from hosting wine tastings in a colonial mansion to dragging her suitcases up 3 flights of stairs in a complex with peeling paint. Why? Ruby didn't stick around to help rebuild the ruins. As soon as the luxury amenities vanished, so did her loyalty. Why? She petitioned to move back in with her biological mother, in Ohio before the moving trucks even arrived. Why? The sisterly bond she and Mom had performed for Instagram evaporated the second there was no longer a pool or a credit card to glue it together. Why? Mom was left completely alone in her new, small life. She had traded her son for a daughter who viewed her as an ATM. Why? The silence from her end was heavy, but this time it wasn't a punishment, it was a retreat. She had lost her husband, her stepdaughter, her home. Why? And her reputation in a single month. She wanted to be the queen of a perfect kingdom. Why? But she ended up sitting on a folding chair in an empty apartment with nothing but her pride. I watched the fallout from a distance. Why? Feeling a strange mixture of grief and relief. The war was over. The bad guys had lost. I was finally free. 18 months later. Why? My life looked nothing like the wreckage I had left behind. I was a freshman in college. Why? Carrying a solid GPA and paying my own way with scholarships and a work-study job. The constant knot of anxiety in my chest had finally unraveled. Why? I no longer flinched when a door slammed or worried about invisible rules. My dorm room was small, but it was mine. Why? I had photos on the wall of friends who actually showed up. Then, on a Tuesday night, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Why? Glowing ominously on my desk while I studied for finals. Normally, I let those go to voicemail, but some instinct made me reach out. Why? I pressed answer and held the device to my ear, saying nothing. The silence on the other end was heavy. Why? Filled with shaky breathing that sounded familiar yet terrifying. Jack? The voice was thin and brittle, stripped of all its former authority. Why? It's Mom. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I just stared at my textbook. She didn't wait for a greeting. Why? She launched into a breathless catalog of her misery. I know you're busy, but I just needed to hear your voice. She wept. Things are so hard. Darren is gone. Ruby went back to Ohio. I lost the house. I'm working double shifts just to pay rent on a studio apartment. She paused. Why? Waiting for me to fill the silence with sympathy. I remembered the gray scarf sitting in the trash. I remembered the DMV. Why? I felt absolutely nothing but a dull curiosity. I made mistakes. She continued, her voice hitching. I got caught up in everything. Why? But we used to be a team, remember? Just you and me against the world. She was pulling the oldest cord in our history. Why? Trying to see if it was still attached to my heart. I was hoping we could meet for coffee. I just want to see my son. Why? I want to fix this. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted to repair the bridge only because she had nowhere else to walk. I finally spoke. Why? My voice calm and unrecognizable to the boy who climbed out a window. We were never a team, Mom. I was just your prop. She gasped. Why? But I kept going. You didn't lose me because of a mistake. You threw me away because you thought you found a better family. Now that they're gone. Why? You want your backup plan back. I closed my textbook, signaling the end of the session. I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not even your victim. Why? I'm just a stranger. Jack, please, she whispered, sounding smaller than I ever thought possible. Why? I have no one. I let that hang in the air for a second. I know, I said softly. I know exactly how that feels. I didn't say goodbye. Why? I just tapped the red icon and blocked the number. I looked around my quiet dorm room. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. Why? I finally had the one thing. She never gave me a future that belonged entirely to me. I went back to studying.